Well, I want to thank Richard and Gail for inviting me tonight to talk about the Corporate Transparency Act that's coming up on January 1st, 2024. And it is awesome to be able to explain this. I get angry, more and more angry every time I talk about it, about what's being just shoved down our throats with no debate. I'll get that in a second. But in the meantime, it's good to know because forewarned is forearmed. And luckily, you'll be able to know about a way to not have to suffer at all with this new law if you take positive action. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here briefly and get my presentation up, and we will get started. All right. So the Corporate Transparency Act is 100% changing everything that you've ever known about doing business or investing in this country. It was passed in the middle of the night as part of an appropriations bill. This is like in the late 2020. And they specifically put it out a little bit, kicked that can down the road for a few years until it would come into effect, 4 years later, which now it's about to happen. January 1st, 2024 is the day it first comes into power. And I'm going to tell you something, guys. It is going to nuke most asset protection strategies, especially those that are using LLCs. And as I get into this, you're going to understand more why. But the most important thing for anybody, even if you don't have an LLC, this is going to allow the IRS and the feds basically to connect the dots on all of your businesses and your investments. Right now, they don't have a full picture. But when all this information that we're going to be required to give over to them, that's going to be the magic bullet. And it will put you and your businesses under the IRS's microscope like never before. And I really am not exaggerating with that. So just introduce myself. My name is Don Thornton. I'm known as Don the Short Sale Guy because I have flipped over 3,500 foreclosures. Most of them have been short sales. This is my 22nd year in real estate investing, and I am trustee of a trust that works great to accomplish all of my financial and business goals. Because I paid way too much in taxes in my real estate investing career. That's always the double-edged sword. When you become successful and you start making money, then that's when the tax man comes. And another thing that I really didn't really anticipate this would be a huge pain point was when I realized I just had to, the more successful I got, the more houses that I put into pipeline, the more worried I got that I'd get sued, slip and fall lawsuits, things like that. So the only way I knew how to shield myself at least somewhat from the potential of a lawsuit was to carry way too much liability insurance. Not knowing that kind of made me a target, and it was kind of counterproductive. But luckily, I eventually did find a way to get the following. I get 100% lawsuit-proof asset protection for all my personal and my business assets. And we're talking about a lot of major tax reduction that comes along with it. And, I got off the grid. And it was nice that, the 2022 income was I only made $18,011.32 as far as, anybody knows that can look up on my tax return. So I was really happy about that I'm as off the grid as I need to be. But I have talked to so many people, and I decided that I was going to dedicate myself to educating those who need the information that I've been able to find so that they can follow the path. Now, before I get involved in this, to explain what this is, I need to have a disclaimer stating that I'm not a licensed legal or tax or accounting professional. Everything I say here is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for legal, tax, or accounting advice, nor should it be considered such. You should consult with a licensed professional before entering into any financial transaction. All right, let's get into this. What is the Corporate Transparency Act? It is a new federal database that specifically targets entrepreneurs, business people, and investors. Now, the government always, anytime they do something that infringes on our rights and chips away at our anonymity, they always put it out there. Oh, this is to fight money laundering or terrorism or drug trafficking. That's the explanation, right? Why they're doing that's the cover. But actually, they're going after all of us. And the bottom line is they think we aren't paying enough taxes. That's the bottom line. Now, let's remember, there's been a lot of information the last year and a half about these 85,000 new IRS agents that were supposed to be hired. Remember the billions that was supposed to be added to the IRS budget, help them become more efficient. All this new AI capabilities that they're going to have and upgrading their IRS digital capabilities. Remember all that stuff? Well, that's there. That was already funded. And so now the only thing that was missing was an all-encompassing database to gather all of our info and a law that would compel us to give up our personal and our corporate anonymity, which would, of course, allow them to squeeze us for more and more money to go to the government. Well, the Corporate Transparency Act is the law that ties all of this together. It's very convenient, how this all worked. It's enforced by the Department of Treasury under the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. What does that tell you? That was like a slap in the face. I was like, oh, okay. They're serious about this. If FinCEN is the one that's been tasked to enforce the law, that's pretty, it's a little scary, frankly. Now, it's always interesting. Who do they exempt? Who does the government exempt? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's not people that don't have a lot of money. So the businesses and people that have over $5 million in gross receipts and have 20 or more full-time U.S.-based employees, they're exempt. So in other words, the big companies, the Fortune 500 companies, they're exempt. Why is that? Well, they have the lobbyists and they have the money to buy off the politicians. We're the low-hanging fruit. They can go after us because we don't have any political power as far as what they think. So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of this. Who has to register? Like I said, if you have an LLC, you have an S Corp, you have a C Corp, you have an LLP or an LLLP, any of that, or if you even have 25% ownership in any of that stuff, and if you're making less than $5 million in gross receipts, or you have less than 20 employees, or, if you have 25% or more ownership in any entity, or they have this little nebulous phrase here that no one really has decided what that is. If you exercise significant control or influence on a business, then that's it. You have to register. That's the bottom line. And not only that, but you have to provide your driver's license or your passport number. You have to give them a scanned photo of the ID you choose. You have to give them your residential address, your date of birth, and your social security number. And of course, there's going to be a new number, a new federal number that we're going to all have to get, a new FinCEN number. And from now on, to have any kind of a financial account, bank, investing, or otherwise, you're going to have a FinCEN and an EIN number to be able to open or maintain any financial account. So what is the result? This is what they've been planning. This is what they want to do. They want to coordinate and analyze your finances, your assets, et cetera, and now they can do that, or they will be able to do that with just a simple push of a button. And they have this AI all set up, and they're going to be analyzing all of your info. And now they have everything, right? Now they're going to have all your stuff. They're going to know exactly what businesses you own or a part owner of. They're going to know what influence you have in other businesses. Every single thing that you've been able to keep separate, they're going to be able to get that, and they'll decide. AI is going to decide if you're suspect. All right. And they're tasking the financial institutions to be the eyes and ears. So they're being trained, they're being, influenced, pressured to report any quote unquote suspicious transactions. So a bank employee now, who, if you're on that radar, if you have a FinCEN account, any bank employee, any financial institution employee can trigger the feds to freeze your accounts and or seize your assets. And oh, by the way, only 1% of funds and assets that are seized historically are ever returned to the owner. All right. Another negative thing here, you have to absolutely 100% have to constantly update your info. So if you move, now you have to tell the government, the feds, where you live. Any kind of a change of ownership. You say if you bring on a new VP or someone, someone gets a 25% more of ownership, you got to report that. And here's the kicker. If you fail to comply, that is a criminal offense. Boy, think about that. They're making this a criminal offense. So every day that you're not in compliance, they can charge you at least $500 minimum, up to $1,500 in a daily fine. The maximum fine is $10,000 and or 2 years in prison. Think about that, huh? Now, when I was younger, I worked in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow in the Soviet Union in the late 1980s. And I tell you, this law is giving me Soviet flashbacks. I'm not kidding here, guys. I don't know if you know this or not, but back then, and it's still a part of a law of Russia today, but back then especially, the government knew everything. You had to give them all the information that you're required to give to the CTA, to the database, just that's what you had to do. So the government was always able to keep tabs on you. And I remember it was my first time in an Iron Curtain country, an authoritarian country, and I was just like, wow. Thank God I was born in America. Thank God that could never happen in the U.S. Well, just like my in-laws, every time they bought a new apartment, they moved to it because they were doing a lot of rehabbing back then. They had to update their address, and their address was right there in their Soviet passport. Now it's almost the same thing. Every time we move, we have to let the feds know exactly where we are. But it's interesting, isn't it, that we're the only group targeted? There's no requirement to register with the feds about where your address is if you're a W-2 employee, or if you're a fat cat, right, a Fortune 500 company. They're going after specifically, they're creating this type of system for small business owners and investors. How dare we know our rights and legal ways to stay anonymous, right? Or how dare we protect our assets and reduce our taxes? No, we're not allowed to do that. Of course, they always exempt the ultra rich, don't they? But not the smaller fish. They're the ones to squeeze. It's a jungle out there, and the government's right there. So if you have a shell company, or if you're using like those anonymous LLCs, like in Wyoming, Delaware, Nevada, if you're using holding companies, they're all going down. They're all going down. They're bringing them out of the darkness into the bright light of federal oversight. Whew, pretty bleak, huh? But I've got a question for you. Why in the world would you voluntarily comply with this outrageous law if there was a legal way to avoid it? That's the question you should be asking yourself. Now, what if I told you there was a loophole, a big loophole? Our clients run their businesses, protect their assets, and protect their anonymity, and get major tax reduction and shield their assets from lawsuits. And we have 100% legal structure and strategy that exempts you from complying with this law, the Corporate Transparency Act. We are exempt. Imagine operating all of your businesses without having to register with the feds. Imagine not having to get a FinCEN number. Imagine not being on the feds' radar at all. Just file a tax return every year. That's it. None of the other BS that they're requiring. Are you ready to learn how? Well, all you have to do is reach out to whoever invited you here to set up a free one-on-one session with me. I can tell you about this, and you will find the way to free yourself from all of this stuff, and feel sorry for the ones that either don't have the vision or don't know how to get out from under it. We know, we have the path, we have the strategy, we have the structure. So you'll definitely want to get a one-on-one with me, and I can go through all of that, and we can examine what you're doing with your business and your investing, and show you how you can save more on your taxes than you are now, I dare say, and get everything asset protected from lawsuits and not have to be on the Fed's radar. So I want to say thank you very much, and choose wisely, like the knight in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. Choose wisely. Take action.